Do you want to get into bourbon but don't know where to start among the sea of available bottles? Well, stay tuned after the break for my 5 best bottles for bourbon beginners. All right, so all alliterations aside, if you are new to whiskey, there is many different options. There's tons of different things. I'm trying to focus on ones that I think will help you learn what you like and then figure out where to go from there and honestly figure out if you even like bourbon. I have 5 available bottles for you to try if you are new to bourbon. If you don't like any of these, that doesn't necessarily mean that you don't like bourbon. It just means that maybe your palate doesn't align with mine. And that's okay. There are tons of these videos all over the internet. If you don't like my suggestions, try someone else's. If you are here and you are not new to bourbon, drop your list of bourbons for beginners. If somebody comes to you and they're interested in bourbon, what do you give them? Drop your 5 list below, because if they don't like mine, maybe they'll check out your selection. We're all a community here. I'm not going to be offended by any of your suggestions, so drop those in a comment and maybe help out the beginners among us. All right, so my number 1 bottle, my intro to bourbon, this is the bottle that you want to try if you are even curious about bourbon, and that is Basil Hayden's. So Basil Hayden's is the lowest proof you can possibly be and still be considered bourbon or whiskey. If you're new here, all bourbon is whiskey, but not all whiskey is bourbon. We're specifically talking about bourbon. That is a subset of whiskey. As you're starting your bourbon journey, it depends on where you've come from. Maybe you've tried whiskey before and thought that it burned a lot. Depending on what you tried, that could be true. This is probably not going to be that. If you find this to be too hot, bourbon might not be your thing. But if you give this a try and you think it feels a little thin, a little water-like, that's fine. I've got more on this list that you can try. But I think Basil Hayden's is the best way to determine if you are interested at all in bourbon or whiskey. So I think this is a good introduction to what bourbon can be, but if you find it to be thin or you just want more out of bourbon, we'll talk about some places that you can go above that. So, number 1, Basil Hayden's. Number 2, I think fits into the fruity aspect of bourbon. So this is Russell's 10-year. It is 90 proof, so it is a full 10 proof point step up from what Basil Hayden's is. I find it to be generally fruit forward. So that's raspberry, that's cherry. That's what I find Russell's to be. I think it's a good introduction into the sweeter, the fruitier flavors of bourbon. I think it's great. I think it's a nice everyday sipper. It's something that you can use in a cocktail and it'll shine through a little bit, but it's not going to blow out your palate. It's not hot. And those fruit flavors, I think, make things interesting and will distract you from the proof and the burn if you're new to whiskey. You can always try it with a little bit of water. You can always try it with ice. If the 90 proof is too much for you, there are ways to kind of get around that. Don't let people on the internet tell you shouldn't add water or ice to your whiskey. You do what you want with what you've bought. Russell's 10-year is a great introduction to the fruitier side of bourbon. All right, our next bottle is another slight step up in proof, but I think it's also a step up in bourbon flavor. I think this is the most traditionally bourbon-y while still being beginner friendly, and I'm sure you've heard of it if you know about bourbon at all. It is Woodford Reserve's bourbon. It is 90.4 proof, as are all of their products except for their batch proof, which is a fantastic whiskey. This, I think, has a lot of the leather, the oak, the brown sugars, the caramels, the things that really are traditionally bourbon-y notes, and it gives them to you in a way that is bold, but not overpowering. I think this is the closest to what a traditional bourbon should taste like, and it's great in cocktails. It's a perfect mint julep. It's a great old-fashioned, great bourbon smash. So it is a versatile one that's not too expensive. It's around the $40 mark. I think this is one that if you can get into sipping it, even if it's over ice or with a little bit of added water, I think this is going to be a good standard for people who are new to being bourbon enthusiasts. So Woodford Reserve, third on my list. Next, we're going to go to something that kind of fills 2 categories. It'll give you a nice little area on where to go next. This is actually the old bottle. The new one is a squattier one. So if you're looking specifically for this, the new one just says 46 French oaked and it's the squattier bottle. But this is Maker's 46. It is a wheated bourbon. It has a wood finish, so it's going to be much more of those wood flavors, a little bit sweeter, a little bit more bold and robust on the palate. It's going to be a little bit thicker consistency. That's what wood finishing does. Basically, you're taking it out of the first barrel and then you're starting the cycle again, but instead of starting it at plain distillate, you're starting it with already aged product. Maker's Mark does a great job of this, and I think this is one step up from the regular Maker's Mark bourbon, which a lot of people are familiar with. You know the red wax, you know that it's a standard for a lot of people. It is one of the most popular bourbons on the planet. And this one, I think, is a natural step up from that. So for Maker's Mark, I think you can figure out a little bit more what you like. Plus, it's 94 proof, so it's not a big step up from the other ones that we're talking about. It is still under 100. I think 100 proof is that line of differentiation for a lot of people where it is truly hot. It'll have a little bit of a bite, but this shouldn't be hot to most people. So, Maker's 46 is a dang good bottle, and it is 4th on my list. Now, finally, this is Bardstown Bourbon Company's Origin Series. So this one's going to be out of left field for quite a few people, and it's, I don't think, one that's going to be on a lot of lists for approachable bourbon, but it's going to give you a great insight into the spicier profile of bourbon. It's going to give you insight into what a higher rye bourbon tastes like. This is 96 proof, so it's the highest proof on our list, but it's still under 100. I think it drinks in that range. If it's too hot, once again, add ice, add water, see if it's something that you appreciate. And while they're not a craft distillery, this is a young distillery. This is Bardstown Bourbon Company's own distillate for the first time ever. This is 6 years old. It's really good. It's under $50, and I think it's a great introduction into kind of those craft flavors, even though they don't necessarily qualify for craft anymore because they are doing a ton of work with contract distilling. Bardstown Bourbon Company is one of my favorites, and I really appreciate this as a high rye bourbon, and I really think it's one that should be on your radar if you are just starting out. So, feel free to reach out. I'm always interested in talking whiskey and interacting with the community. If you liked any of these and you want recommendations for where to go in the future, just drop me a comment. I will respond and maybe give you a little bit of guidance as to where you should go next. If you're not a newcomer to bourbon and you have some ideas, definitely drop them below. I know I said that at the beginning of the video. Always interested in hearing your thoughts and interacting with you guys. So drop me a comment. Be sure to like this video. If you like this content, check out our other videos. Like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already, and we hope you'll join us in drinking like a gentleman. Cheers. So, Woodford, or wow, I keep saying Woodford. This is not Woodford. I know what Woodford is. This is Maker's Mark.